The first year without a natural disaster felt like a miracle. No hurricanes tore through coastlines, no earthquakes shattered cities, tornadoes stopped appearing on radar, volcanoes, once restless giants, fell silent. The news became strangely quiet. Emergency broadcasts faded. People slept without fear of sudden sirens in the night. Some called it divine intervention. Others suspected a new climate technology, some secret global project no government admitted to. But the truth was far stranger. It began with a pattern noticed not by scientists or politicians, but by a 12-year-old girl named Ari in Iceland. She kept a sketchbook filled with dreams, and one night, she drew a mountain wrapped in blue light. The next morning, age of geological, a volcano long monitored for signs of eruption, showed an inexplicable drop in seismic activity. Not just calm, completely still. A week later, she dreamt of a roaring wind trapped in a glass jar, and a Category 5 hurricane that had been forming in the Atlantic simply vanished. Her mother thought it was coincidence. Her teacher wasn't so sure. Soon, scientists started noticing other anomalies. Fault lines no longer shifted. Supercell clouds dispersed on their own. Glaciers slowed their melting without explanation. It was as though the planet had stopped resisting, as if Earth had exhaled and chosen peace. At first, there was celebration. Relief flooded across nations. Countries that had spent billions on disaster prevention and relief redirected those resources to education, healthcare, and art. Insurance companies collapsed. They weren't needed. Rebuilding budgets transformed into city renewal projects. Coastlines flourished. Coral reefs began recovering without storm damage. Forests once scarred by wildfires regrew in undisturbed silence. But as the years passed, something subtle began to change. It wasn't immediate. People still laughed, danced, lived, but a restlessness grew, the kind that scratches at the edge of the soul when nothing pushes back. Without disasters, there were no more stories of brave rescues, no urgent acts of communal survival. The heroism forged in the crucible of crisis began to vanish. Emergency responders found themselves unemployed. Volunteers who had once flown across the world to help now sat at home, uncertain of their purpose. The Earth was safer, yes, but it also felt quieter, too quiet. In Japan, a community that had once rebuilt itself after a tsunami now gathered every year at the seawall and simply stood in silence. They weren't mourning loss anymore, they were mourning the sense of connection that tragedy had once forged. In California, firefighters planted ceremonial blazes just to practice putting them out. In Bangladesh, villages fortified against floods began to sink into economic despair as aid organizations pulled out and jobs disappeared. People started asking, had suffering been necessary all along? Ari, now older and known quietly to a growing scientific community as the dream catalyst, never claimed responsibility. But when interviewed, she said something curious: the Earth isn't punishing us, it was crying, and someone finally heard it. Now it's waiting. Waiting for what? The interviewer asked. For us to change without needing pain, she replied. And for a time, people tried. They built monuments not to disasters, but to resilience. Education focused on empathy instead of fear. Artists filled galleries with depictions of imagined storms and remembered courage. Humanity tried to evolve without the push of catastrophe. But not everyone agreed with this path. A movement called the Resurgence emerged. They believed that struggle was essential, that humanity without challenge would wither. They sought to provoke the planet, to reawaken its fury. Some tried to detonate charges near old fault lines, others attempted to overheat polar regions, but none succeeded. The Earth remained inert, as if it had grown immune to human destruction or simply indifferent. Then, one morning, Ari disappeared. She had been last seen walking toward the sea, barefoot, her sketchbook under one arm. No signs of struggle, no farewell, just a note left behind: when the balance is ready, I will draw again. In the following months, strange things began happening again, not disasters, but echoes. A tremor felt only by animals, a thundercloud that formed, rumbled, then dissipated over New York without a single drop of rain. In the Sahara, an oasis appeared where there had never been one before. People began to wonder if the Earth was not simply a rock floating in space, but something more, an ancient being that had endured our fires and floods, and had now chosen to test us with peace instead of violence, a test not of survival, but of wisdom. The world now lives in that delicate hush: no storms, no quakes, but a sense of quiet anticipation. Every generation is told the story of the time the Earth went silent, Children grow up drawing their own dreams of balance, of harmony not forged through fear but through understanding. And somewhere, perhaps on a distant shore or deep in a hidden forest, a young girl sits with a sketchbook, her pencil poised, listening to the breath of the planet, waiting for the next chapter to begin.